Hey everybody, welcome back to the Sonic Chronicle. My name is Owen, and today I want to talk a little bit about the new Linkin Park album, From Zero. I've already spoken about a number of these songs before. In particular, I've spoken about the Emptiness Machine and Heavy is the Crown. These were two singles that were released off of the album. It's a weird one. Heavy is the Crown was released for the League of Legends Worlds Championships. And The Emptiness Machine was the lead single off of the album before it was released. This album is the debut of Emily Armstrong, the new singer, after Chester Bennington's untimely passing in 2017. So they have a new singer to do the screamy melodic parts. Mike Shinoda is still in there doing the rap parts, which is grand. It's fine. From Zero is the name of the new album, and I've given it a listen, and I'm going to give some of my thoughts on the tracks and the same way that I would have done with Cowboy Carter, Beyonce's album earlier this year, and Taylor Swift's Tortured Poets Department. Was that the name of that album? I think that's what it was called. Anyway, refreshingly, this album is 31 minutes long, so it's not crazy long in any capacity, which is good. It's 11 tracks total, but one of them is the intro, so that's about 20 seconds long. So this album really comes in, doesn't outstay its welcome, and then leaves, which is fine. That's great. It's great that I didn't have to dedicate an entire day to sitting here listening and writing as I did so. So let's get into some of my thoughts. So the first thing that you listen to when the album comes on is their intro, right? It's the From Zero intro is what it's called. It's a choral set of vocals, probably synthed somewhat. But at the end of it, it's about 20 seconds long. At the end of it, there's some small conversations, some small snippet of conversation between Mike Shinoda and Emily Armstrong talking about the name of the album and the origin of it. And she mentions that, that was the name of the first band, right? So before Chester came along, before I suppose Linkin Park became Linkin Park, it was called From Zero. And that was the name of the project, and then it was changed, and then Chester joined at a later stage, and then they blew up. But that's a small snippet. It's not particularly important, and I'll get into the reasons why that's not particularly important later on. The first track off the album is The Emptiness Machine. As I said earlier, I've spoken about this already. It's fine. It's perfectly mediocre. It's Linkin Park by the numbers. It's stadium rock, right? And it doesn't really move the needle for me. As a lead single, and as Emily Armstrong's debut, I really feel like they could have done her better, right? I think that this is a little bit of a disservice to have this as the introduction to Emily Armstrong as a member of the band. And the rest of the album kind of shows that in a lot of ways, and I'll talk about that when we get to the different tracks. Second track, Cut the Bridge. Cut the Bridge, it really, really reminds me of Bleed It Out. From one of their previous albums. I think it's I was going to say Midnight Sun. Minutes to Midnight might be what the album's called. But anyway, regardless of what album it's from, it feels like this is ground that has already been tread by the band. And I'm not sure that there's any value in going back over that ground again. The ideas contained within this song, they've been done before by this band, and they've been done better by this band. So it's a bit unfortunate and a bit weird that they would include it here. There are other tracks on the album that feel that way as well, but I'll talk about that as well. I know that I say that there's stuff that I'm going to talk about later persistently here, but bear with me. Heavy is the Crown. Again, I've made a video about this song. Similar to Emptiness Machine, pretty bland. It's stadium rock for a stadium level event, as I mentioned, the League of Legends Worlds tournament. Overall, I'm a bit confused as to why it's on here. This is it was, I suppose, put up as like this track that they wrote for this event. So why not leave it there? Why not leave it with the event? That's a thing that you can have. It's there. It's done. And this would free up space on this album for a new track that might be a little bit more worth their time and effort putting it onto an album. And that can just be, its own separate thing that lives over here that people can listen to as well. That's just my opinion. I'm sure that there are people who will think differently about that. But I think that if it's for another project, leave it with that other project. So track 5 then, this is where things start to get interesting. So this is track 5 out of 11. This is Over Each Other. This is, I think this is probably the best song on the album. This really shows off Emily Armstrong's range, right? Vocal range. It shows that she has some versatility in her style, in her abilities. She basically sings the entire song solo, apart from what I think were some backing vocal parts from Mike Shinoda in parts of the songs. You know, it's different, it's fresh, it's a ballad, has some great dynamics throughout it. You know, the drums really accentuate some of the vocals and the verse parts. Yeah, it feels fresh, even though it is quite stripped back compared to some of the other songs and compared to what they might have done historically as a band, which is great. Again, I don't want that retreading. I want the new stuff. And I really think that this could have been a better lead single for the band's new lineup. You know, I think that this is much less safe sounding. It sounds less like Linkin Park historically, and potentially more like what Linkin Park will sound like in the future. And that's great. That's what I want. Then we get Casualty, right? This is a very punk-oriented song. And I don't know if leading from Over Each Other into this one was the right move, but it was definitely a bold move. Because I'm not sure that it really works as a companion piece. Because again, you know, Emily kind of like screams throughout this, you know. It's, again, very punk-orientated, not pop-punk. So maybe more like Rancid, or I guess maybe like Brody Dahl of the Distillers. You know, given her vocal style and given Emily's vocal styles. There are synths involved here, you know, so again, it is still, you know, a Linkin Park song. But if there weren't any synths, or at least not as many synths, this would just be a straight up, you know, rollicking punk song throughout. And it is an interesting change. It is an interesting veer in direction for the album. And while I'm not sure if it works, I'm glad it's there because it breaks things up and it keeps things fresh and it keeps things interesting. Overflow brings things back onto the rails a little bit, okay? I say a little bit, decidedly more back on the rails when it comes to Overflow. Sounds much more like hip-hop, I suppose. So less hip-hop, more hip-hop sounding. I didn't really like it. It's bland. Not much to the instrumentation, doesn't really do much, doesn't really go anywhere. Again, it does allow Emily to show off some range and kind of accentuate the differences in their timbre, their vocal styles, between her and Chester. I think, realistically, that's probably the main reason why it's on there, right? Just to kind of, again, drill home that, you know, Emily isn't Chester, which, you know, I can understand it. But if that's the only value, should it really be on your album of songs? This collection of songs that you've written as a group? I don't know. I mean, I say this all the time, but, you know, Bob Dylan, you know, used to say that, you know, you'd write 10 songs and throw away 9, and then you've got one good one, right? And then that goes on the album, and then you do the same thing. So realistically, you write 100 songs per 10-track album. I don't think they did it for this one. Two-Faced is cool. It's the next song on the album. So we're at song number... Oh, where are we at? 11, 10, 9. Song number 8, right? On song number 8 here. It's pretty raucous, reminiscent of early Linkin Park. It's very like Hybrid Theory in some ways, in terms of its album sound. Very much like Paper Cut as a song, particularly in the middle section. It's a bit of a pity, because again, I'm not sure why they're covering over ground that they've already gone over, right? It's trying to, I suppose, make things feel a bit safe, but not doing enough to make it interesting or to push boundaries, which again, I really feel like they should have done across this record. For me, this isn't the time for a trip down memory lane. This is the time to make something new and different. I think what they were trying to do was something not dissimilar to The Force Awakens. That it was effectively A New Hope recreated, but with some new characters, some slightly different plot points or whatever. Grand, right? Stick a new skin on it, right? But I don't think that this was the situation, or should have been the situation here, given how beloved Chester was and how much input that he had had previously as well. Stained. We're at track number 9. Starts out with big drums, lots of space, hip-hop heavy, not awful, just doesn't really do much. It doesn't really explode, doesn't really build. Even the chorus is really flat. Really needs a lot more energy behind it. It's not for me. It's not my favorite song in the world. It doesn't really do much. IGYEIH is the name of this song. Really, that is just an abbreviation for I Gave You Everything I Had. It comes right out the gates. This one, while Stained didn't have much energy behind it, this one has tons of attitude associated with it. I really liked the stylistic choice or production choice at the very, very start of this song, to start with the vocals low and then very slowly bring Emily in, screaming over the top of the main riff. And the beat's cool. During the verse parts, there's guitar trem picking going on in the background, just behind Emily's vocals. It's low in the mix, but it's there, and it really creates a nice ambient sound, and it really supports the vocal. The chorus has some really great attitude in there. Feels new. It doesn't feel like it's trying to capture an older, more nostalgic vibe, that this is writing for a new era, rather than trying to drag an older era along with it, even without the member that had, defined that previous era, Aside from that, really aggressive riffing in the intro and the outro feels really good, feels great, feels like something, right? Or it makes you feel something about the music, which isn't really something that you have much of on this album. Final song on the album, Good Things Go. Nice, simple guitar intro, nice riff. I think it's a solid little riff. Shinoda leads the vocals on this one, particularly in the verses. Armstrong does some backing vocals, which is nice. It's nice to see that Shinoda hasn't taken an entire backseat throughout this record. And really, this is this is probably the best hip-hop track that we have on this, right? So between Overflow, Stained, and Good Things Go, this one is by far even, the best of the three. It feels like there's really good interplay between the band members here. Armstrong really shines here in the choruses. She's really bolstered by some big instrumentation, some really nice synth builds in the choruses as well. And lyrically speaking, I think this is probably one of the better efforts on the album. In terms of Shinoda's delivery, I kind of believe him, right, when he's delivering these lyrics. It's a good track. And that's my track-by-track analysis, my track-by-track breakdown. Overall, as an album, I as I've said multiple times throughout this review, it's not as strong as it could be. Very much held back by trying to recapture the past and potentially trying to relive some glory days, which is ironic given that the album is called From Zero. The idea of From Zero suggests that nothing came beforehand and that this is a blank slate. Really though, they've been leaning throughout the record on the history of the band, right? So really calling it From Zero is disingenuous at worst, but misguided at best. I think it's worth pointing out as well that there are a number of times over the course of the album where there are studio clips in there as well, right? So just little snippets of conversation that have been captured where they're kind of pushing the, we work so well together naturally narrative, particularly in one little snippet where it's like, oh yeah, we're right on the same page, and like Emily says something and he's like, yeah, that's exactly right, and then it kicks into a new track. So I just thought that was a little odd, a little bit worth pointing out. I think the album is a weird one. There are 4 or 5 songs that I'd characterize as good, fresh sounding songs. I think the album is probably getting like a 5 or a 6 out of 10, probably closer to 5, just because, again, I think that there's an awful lot of treaded ground there, and when they do try to break out of that, they miss more than they hit. And I do think that it's a pity, because it does really shine, as I said, when it breaks from history and embraces that they aren't who they used to be, and that the band is fundamentally different compared to what it was, in 2017, before Chester passed away. What I want from this album is for there to be learnings, and for them to take away, for them to have learned things from the recording process of this, and maybe even from the reception of this album, that they can't lean on the past. Whatever they are now, they have to make the most of it. And Emily is a part of that now, like it or not. And that's where we're going to leave it for now. Thank you all very much for stopping by and for hanging out with me while we spoke about the new Linkin Park album From Zero. If you like this video, please do go ahead and hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this kind of content in the future. On a weekly-ish basis, I have a release radar review where I blind listen to some tracks that Spotify has pushed to me. And I have, of course, the Casually in Conversation series as well. That's definitely worth subscribing for. So if you haven't seen those already, I definitely recommend checking them out. And if you have any comments on anything that I spoke about here, if you have any differences of opinion in terms of the tracks, please do leave me comments. Love to hear them. Love to see them. For now, though, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for stopping by and for hanging out with me. I really appreciate you taking the time. And I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.